Today, a look at the future of schools.
And by future, we mean this fall.
Will schools open? Will teachers return to classrooms?
What about remote learning? Can Zoom replace classrooms?
That's a dangerous road ahead.
I'm Alexa Scordato, and this is Future Forward.
I am Stephen Rosenbaum. Let us launch. Hey, everyone. Howdy, howdy, howdy. We occasionally do these single subject half hours, and sitting here thinking about the middle of the summer and what's on everybody's mind, it just seems like everything comes back to education. So we pulled some really interesting clips. We have a lot to talk about. And just to be clear, we're not talking about kindergarten. We're not talking about higher ed. We're talking specifically about middle school, high school, and Alexa, you're smart. Isn't there just an easy answer? Isn't there just like a
No. Definitely not an easy answer.
but why? Why is this so hard?
I mean, we don't have like the macro coronavirus way of doing things figured out. Like we're still in parts of the country arguing about whether masks are good or bad.
So sidebar, but just I went into the Apple store this weekend to drop off a computer to get repaired. And first of all, there was a line around the block to get in, and I had an appointment. And then they took my temperature.
Mm-hmm.
And then they said that they didn't let my mask in the store because it's a mask that has a vent, not a vent, but like a two-way filter.
Mm-hmm.
So they gave me a paper mask to put on instead.
Whoa.
Yeah. So I was like, okay, special mask. And it wasn't a fancier mask. Mine was fancier, but they had rules about the mask, the temperature, the whole thing. It was,
wow.
Yeah. But other than that, pretty good experience. All right, back to schools. So let's start with we're going to really kind of try and pull some threads here and understand why education is so important and also why it's so hard, and then maybe some solutions that aren't immediately apparent to the outside universe. So let's just start with this New York Times piece. Says news analysis, and the headline is reopening schools is way harder than it should be. So leaving them closed. So is leaving them closed. Now what do we do? Which is basically the show we're going to have. So we can just read the Times and call it a day. But I thought this was a pretty good. This is a July 23rd article, so it's recent. Not yesterday, but not a lot has changed since the end of July. Well, a little bit, which we'll talk about. Let's just start with why it's hard.
Yeah.
I'm throwing it to you. Why is it hard?
We have states where there are rising cases, and so part one is you have different contexts. It is not easy to say, here's the universal school reopening plan. Here's top-down leadership saying this is the way it should go, right? So it's one, fragmented across different states. And so governors and local school districts are all sort of following different protocols depending on their context. And then the second is that the communities and the parents are also have really different opinions. Do I feel good about my kid going to school? Or, oh my gosh, I'm so tired of having my kid at home. Like, please get them off my hands, right? So that's part one.
Yeah, and certainly the unspoken complexity here is for all parents who are working remotely, people that, companies that have employees working remotely with kids at home, I mean, they certainly have some sensitivity and some understanding, but there's only, when you're trying to have a business call and the kids are screaming in the background and the dog is barking, it's charming for a bit, but it's also not that charming.
Right. Yeah.
All right. So let's start with the part of what makes this so interesting and hard is that it really is a three-dimensional problem, right? So you've got the physicality of schools, which is these buildings. Then you've got parents and their needs. Then you've got students, and I don't know if you remember high school. I do. I remember it rather vividly. And whatever the hell the teachers or the administration wanted me to do, I think I paid attention to only kind of parenthetically. Like,
Yeah.
like kids don't think they're going to die, don't really think about getting sick. Mostly they think about their friend groups and hanging out and, and the politics of being a teenager if you're that age. But like no amount of boogeyman scary and data is going to make kids not behave like kids.
Right. Yeah.
So they're going to screw around. They're going to do drugs. They're going to have sex. They're going to, go to the corner store and steal gum. They're going to do, they're not going to wake up in the morning, put on a mask, go like robots, sit in a classroom, consume data, do homework, and go to bed, watch some TV, and go to bed and wake up the next morning. They're going to be bad. They're going to.
But even if they're good, you just think about how realistic is it to sort of be in a school environment where you're not like touching things or you're not breathing over someone's shoulder in a crowded hallway. There's just a lot of shared surface area. Banisters, railings, gym lockers. It's a lot.
And just so long as we're making it terrible and hard for a few minutes. And then you've got, even if kids are fine, and even if kids are healthy and they're not going to get the disease and they're not going to die, which, there's lots of debate about whether or not how susceptible to COVID kids are. They are a connective human between a family situation that the school has no visibility into and teachers who are, some number of them, let's presume lots of them, are older, concerned about their family's health, their partner or significant other's health, their children's health. So, like, even if kids play by all the rules and they wear their masks and they learn like good little boys and girls in school and they don't screw around, and they don't have any extracurriculars, they don't do sports or they don't, any of that, which is what makes high school bearable, by the way. You still have them as connective tissue between humans that are teachers and humans that are families at home. And that's, that has the unusual nature of being scary in a bilateral way, right? Scary
Right.
for families that the kids could be bringing home disease to the family, scary for teachers. So secretly, school is a physical school, even if you social distance and break up the classrooms into pods and do all these things, is like that's a bad solution.
Yeah. But so necessary, right? It's just
And Cuomo's decision on Friday was puzzling, right?
he said any school can reopen, but each school district has to submit an approved plan.
And there was a number of there was a percentage of cases at which point the school could not open, right?
Mm-hmm.
So unlike the federal drama with an election coming up, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't get the sense that Cuomo's decisions are overtly political, other than the Blasio Cuomo endless arm wrestling that is frustrating.
Yeah, I think Cuomo has been pretty consistent about being very data oriented and methodical, right? Like he has been very transparent with the different phases, the conditions that counties or areas need to meet in order to satisfy conditions for reopening. And I don't know. I mean, he's been reading from the same script since the beginning.
So I haven't. So we've got a bunch of links to get through, but like I didn't get a sense from Friday. Today's 2 days later. I didn't get a sense that his announcement triggered any number of decisions that were like. I mean, I guess if I were a betting man, I'd say upstate opens selectively, downstate doesn't, based on data, which which isn't about the politics of the state. It's just upstate is more social distance, and the numbers are smaller, and
Well, this is what's going to be tricky, right? Because it's like you have what is sort of sanctioned by the government and what is possible, but then when it comes to the plans themselves. I mean, I don't envy any school administrators right now who have to wrestle with parents on this issue.
Well, so if you think about it from a parental standpoint, every parent who has a school-age child is reaching out to somebody in the education community and losing their mind and saying, you don't understand. We have an aging grandparent who lives in the home. They're on oxygen. We can't have our child. We have to be remote, but we don't have enough laptops. We have one laptop. We have intermittent internet access. Like, we need help. Like, and each one of those parents is advocating for their child and their family, but the result is the inputs to the school, like, there is not a one size fits all answer to that question.
Right.
Okay, we're shipping you a Chromebook.
Yeah, and it's changing in real time. I mean, I was just talking to a friend yesterday, and she was saying that her school has issued now 4 different plans. It was one thing a few weeks ago, then it shifted, then it shifted, and it shifted. Like, and it's different flavors from online only to hybrid to certain blocks of hours and drop offs, like staggered drop offs and pickups.
Yeah, I mean, none of that seems like anyway. It's. I mean, let's keep going through some of the stories we pulled, and then we'll maybe see if we can get to it. So, anything else from the Times? Anything else that from this news analysis piece that jumped off the, why is it so hard? I think we've kind of covered that.
Yeah.
Now, what do we do? We'll get there in a minute. All right. So the next piece is this Brookings Institute piece, which is, not surprisingly, way more geeky than the New York Times. But this, I thought, was actually, I mean, this issue of learning loss for young children, I thought was really interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, this article addresses some studies that talk about the if younger children are susceptible or contagious. There's a study cited in Korea that said children under 10 are half as contagious. But either way, I mean, these are critical developmental years. And so I think one of the biggest takeaways for me in the article is that if we're not sending kids to school, that they're actually missing out big time.
Yeah.
Not just even from the curriculum standpoint, but from like the socialization standpoint.
Yeah, I'm less sympathetic to that argument because I feel like, I mean, to be fair, all of this is predicated on this fictitious, but all these companies are doing, vaccines, and they're all in late stage, and they're all being tested, and like, I mean, everyone's kind of pegged the vaccine / cure to next June or July. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I think all bets are off if we get through winter and a bunch of these vaccines fail, and Americans say, I'm not taking the vaccine. And then that's another, like I'm willing to write off the 2021 academic calendar, mm-hmm. and still feel like everything, other than the economy and all that stuff, which we'll save it for another show. So I don't buy, this is my politics, and you guys can all yell at me, but like, I don't buy the we're going to lose a year of education versus we're going to lose the lives of parents, teachers, or children. I just think,
yeah, I don't think it's not meant to be like a binary, like life or educating kids. I think it's more just like examining the fact that this is tough, right? Like I can understand why some parents would say they want their kids in school because they are not equipped to educate their kids at home.
Yeah. Yeah, and it was interesting that the Times said kind of casually, this is more an issue for women than for men. Like I kind of read that and went, really? Okay. I mean, I understand,
Hmm.
but like there wasn't like there was nothing in parentheses about, it was essentially women having to look at whether or not they're getting off a career track to stay home to care for their children, which
Right.
struck me as surprisingly sexist. I mean, maybe accurate, but like, um, you know, I would assume that if I had school age kids today, I would be talking to my wife about, you know, her job going to 3 days a week, my job going to 3 days a week, we having some kind of a schedule, negotiating that with our companies, you know,
Mhm.
who's on point, because that is
Yeah.
the other thing, by the way, about remote learning is like, someone was telling me this morning that like what do you do when the kid who's on your remote Zoom class says, I'm going to go get a glass of water and walks away from the computer? Like,
Right.
I mean, and then goes to the bathroom and then comes back 10 minutes later, like
Hmm.
after petting the dog or, whatever. Like very hard to like, who's the person on the computer screen being in charge of your child from 1 o'clock to 3 in the afternoon doesn't mean you've got supervision.
Right. Yeah.
Um,
And some teachers are doing asynchronous content. Like I have a friend who's a teacher, and um, he's like recording videos of himself, but he can't even guarantee that his students are watching it.
yeah. All right. So then we get to NPR, which I think is actually this is a pretty good granular. The headline was, "How safe is your school's reopening plan? Here's what to look for."
Hmm.
And this I thought was uh, a little Garanimalish, a little simplistic, but kind of helpful. A little less. Whatever Brookings made my head explode. This seemed more like something parents could use, like getting to school, riding the bus. Yes, entry to school guidelines, um, masking policies, um,
Hmm.
in-class social distancing in cohorts, um, what to do when someone gets sick, sanitizing surfaces, air circulation,
Hmm.
lunches and snacks, almost done, recess, gym and sports, the missing ingredient, looking for a boost in funding. Oh yeah, like the money part. So I really, there was a piece on NPR the other day in which school bus drivers were being interviewed about whether or not, they were going to go back to work, and they were pretty incensed. They feel, they said in some surprisingly snarky way, like you can talk about your kids going to school, but if we don't drive them there, they don't get there.
Right.
Like we
Like they
want to
don't have
be.
a choice, kind of thing.
Yeah, and that they're exposing themselves to a bus full of kids not wearing masks in an enclosed space, and they can wear a mask as a driver, but um, school bus drivers was not on my list of things to be concerned about, and I felt as I listened to the piece, I felt a little bad about that. I was like, oh yeah, like
Right.
that's a critical part. Um, um, Anything from the NPR piece that surprised you?
I mean, I appreciated sort of the actual simplicity of it, but it sort of made me think about, again, the challenges of reinforcing some of these policies, like masking, for example. Like, yes, you would think it is an easy thing to do, but there are some states where it is not universally accepted to do that. And so, if kids don't have sort of behaviors to model, how can we actually expect them to do that at school? And then you also just think they're kids. Like, I don't know about you, but it's like in my middle school, high school, like, we had a dress code, but to the extent that kids wanted to follow that all the time, like slim to none.
Yeah, so I find now when I'm walking down the street, like walking the dogs, I added a little cord to the back of my mask that hangs around my neck, and I'll walk down the street with a mask on. But if I look up the street and there's nobody for a block and a half ahead, I'm taking it down to my chin because it's uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's hot.
Um, it's hot, and but I think, and we haven't even talked about, I mean, I don't know if you and I speaking and seeing each other speak and understanding each other is 100% communications connection, a mask makes that harder by what, 30%, 40%?
Mm-hmm.
So if you're a teacher and you're wearing a mask and you're a student in a classroom and you're wearing a mask and you're trying to communicate without being able to essentially lip read, that seems to me really hard.
Right.
All right. So NPR, by the way, all of these articles we're talking about will be in the show notes. So feel free to read them, comment, send us tweets or emails or whatever. All right. So moving on, this is the Washington Post. Confused by the CDC's changing guidance on school reopening, here are recommendations from experts not pressured by the White House.
I love that like disclaimer, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the CDC came out with these really, really, I thought, very conservative reopening guidelines. Trump screamed at them and said, you know, they're expensive and unnecessarily tough, and we're going to rewrite them. And then 3 days later, the CDC magically came out with new guidelines that seemed like they got written by the White House, which, you know, was humiliating and sad.
Yeah.
All right. So, yeah, this is the Washington Post gnawing on Trump's legs. So good for them. So
number one is like so obvious, right? Like schools can't open if the virus isn't contained in the local community.
Which, by the way, it's not in something like
36 states or something.
Right. Yeah, which is more than half the country.
Yeah.
All right. So that's number one. Number two, the decision to open schools has to be a local decision based on latest available local scientific data.
Yep.
So, at the risk of sounding depressing and snarky, you know, New York notwithstanding, I grew up part of my actually high school years in a small town. Does anyone remember what local government in small towns actually is? I mean, it's the car dealership owner who runs for councilman. Like when you say data, I mean, you know, where's this magical data coming from? I mean, who's processing it all? And, you know, what's the horrible, you know, there's lies, damn lies, and statistics.
I interpreted local to sort of mean like at the state level, giving then county level data, if that's possible.
So you're saying,
because like my parents have a second house in Pennsylvania, and so I can access like through the Pennsylvania, like the governor's site, sort of if this county has cases.
okay, I mean,
So
but that data, which used to go to the CDC, now goes directly to the White House, or there's some, I don't know. We'll save that for. All right, let's just go through these 10 really quickly because they're good. 3, infection rates for children ages 10 to 19 are similar to infection rates for adults 20 to 49. Okay, schools need well-developed protocols for reopening and for steps to follow if the virus appears in school, which it will. Schools should consider strategies that encourage cocooning, staggered drop-off, and what does cocooning mean? Social distancing on buses and making the best use of ventilation. Cocooning. Children can be cocooned during the school day into small groups of 6 to 10 students. Oh, I've heard the phrase pod. Yeah.
Yeah.
So one of the things, and I know this because I have someone in my family that's interested in is going into teaching. Like if you're a teacher and ordinarily you had 30 students in a classroom, and now you're cocooning them into 5 or 6, you know, groups of 5. All of a sudden, you need a lot more teachers to manage the cocoons.
Yep.
You need like a cocoon master. Is the vaccine likely to bail us out? It's off the table, right? Fine, okay. Teachers in schools need to protect, but so do non-teaching staff. Interesting.
It's like
right?
your lunch ladies, your
Janitor.
monitors. Yeah.
extracurricular activities are going to be extremely challenging. So yeah, they're canceled. The cost of attending all of this is astronomical at a time when state low. Yeah, right. So you got to pay all these people.
Yep.
Anyway, 10. Town hall audiences were skeptical that it would be safe for students and educators if schools fully reopened at the beginning of the school year.
Yep.
Me too.
Yes.
So
I mean, we're a few weeks away.
Yeah. And then here's from the Hill. We're asking the wrong questions about school reopening. So I read this twice to try and see if I could discern what they thought the right question was.
I interpreted it as like, why are we zooming in on schools, and why are we not asking sort of the higher level questions like, why can't we get our act together? Like, over the next 6 to 8 weeks, why can't we be on a path where this is under control across all 50 states?
So I swore we weren't going to go down the Trump path on this pod, but just for a second, isn't really what we're doing, isn't the Trump White House essentially embraced this vague notion of herd immunity? Isn't that really where we're going, or trying to go?
Yeah, I guess maybe, but it hasn't been framed that way.
Well, no, because it means people are going to die, and we know it.
And they're already dying. I mean, I would much rather, was it Sweden that sort of did this? They were just like, okay, whatever, things are going to stay open. But that guidance was given loudly, clearly, consistently from the top since day one, and they have healthcare coverage for everyone. So
interesting. All right, so I want to make sure we get through this, like 3 more, and then I want to get to some alternative positive stuff. So here's the Daily News, which is Cuomo saying that all New York school districts can reopen but must get specific plans. That's what we talked about at the top of the pod. Let me ask a blunt question. Would we have been happier if he'd said New York schools are going to be all remote for the foreseeable future?
Honestly, it's tough to say because I don't have kids, right? And you don't have school age kids. I just look at my friends who have kids, and they're dying. They're like they've just said this is a shit show.
Let's be careful of dying. You don't mean they're actually sick.
Yeah, sorry. They're
emotionally
inconvenienced and ripping their hair out.
And just putting kids in front of Minecraft all day and video games and
they're like, my kids can only be on the computer so much. My kid's getting screen fatigue. My kid's getting anxiety. My kid misses their friend. My kid misses just life. It's I can't get anything done. I can't take a shower, brush my teeth, do my job, be a parent, figure out what to eat, and then also how to be like a middle school teacher.
Okay, that's just depressing as hell. I mean,
yeah.
Yeah.
There's a part of me that's like, I'm sure there are a ton of parents who would love the child care support. But I also know that they don't want to put their families at risk. So it's tough.
For people that have resources, isn't the answer, and I know that that's, not the mass population, but for people that have resources, isn't the answer, we're going to hire a teacher or an assistant teacher, we're going to find a safe space in our neighborhood, we're going to get 6 or 8 kids, we're going to drop them off every morning, we're going to pick them up afternoon, so there's no busing.
Like the most controversial tweet on my timeline last week. It was like Jason Calacanis, who's a tech guy, right? He was totally he had a lot of digital stones thrown at him for even trying to source a teacher. And I think the response is because some people are like, oh my gosh, we are just going to have this even wider divide between the haves and the have-nots. It's like the wealthy, privileged people who are going to be safe, who are going to have their kids educated, and it's going to be the working class, minorities, people of color, etc., who are going to get sick and who are going to have who are going to be disadvantaged even more.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to take back that I said that. So don't.
There's nothing against you. It's a real thing where it's like, okay, what is a good way to solve this problem? But then it doesn't address sort of the macro discrepancies in society. So there are grenades across this whole conversation. It's really hard.
All right. So two more. This is the Atlantic. This is a great article. The headline is "Reopening Schools Was Just an Afterthought." And the subhead is "Americans Found Out the Hard Way That Education is Essential Infrastructure."
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's interesting, right? I mean, there is definitely an easy way to shrug your shoulders and say, well, you know, people that are counting on schools to be babysitters, you know, now we're learning. It's like, but yeah, I mean, there's a whole piece of society structured around parents going to work, kids going to school, kids learning, kids having friends, kids having after school activities, parents coming home from work, kids coming home from school. How was your day at school? Oh, it was okay. You know, like that's the rhythm of life.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, for the first, I don't know, 21 years of my life, my entire existence was rooted in a calendar school year.
And by the way, we're not talking about college because that's a different shit show for another pod thing. So this Atlantic article, I actually think really gets to the nub of what we're talking about, which is like how much of our, you know, I mean, I don't know what the percentages of two-parent working families there are, but it strikes me as very high, and maybe even not particularly income dependent. Like it's not like, you know, wealthy families or well-to-do families or economically stable families. You know, the husband goes to work and the wife stays home and bakes cookies. That you know, that chapter in American life ended a long time ago. So I do think that the Times, this is getting back to that first article, the Times does kind of get it right when they say, you know, are women going to have to put their careers on hold because somebody has to stay home to run the homeschool for a year? And what does that mean? Even though it's sexist and wrong, and it should be, you know, a coin toss, or whoever's career could most likely manage to be paused and then restarted. But nobody's can, right? The answer is, you know, you tell your company you're leaving for a year to go care for your kids. You know, they're like, well, good luck with that. Let us know when you're back in the market, and
Yep.
along with everyone else who's looking for a job.
Yeah, I can put in two late editions on the topic of women coronavirus. So back in April, Vanity Fair wrote about the gender gap, motherhood in the time of coronavirus, and then more recently, there was an op-ed in the New York Times about how you, as like a woman, you can have, you can be a mother or you can be a parent, but you can't be both. So, yeah, it's tough.
All right, so this last article, and then we'll get to some positive stuff. This is Gothamist piece about New York City teachers saying they're in the dark as to how to reopen their classrooms. I mean, here's, I think, what's on the horizon. I think a bunch of schools will open because the numbers are down in New York.
Mm-hmm.
I think some kids will get sick or some teachers will get sick, and then they will be isolated, and then the schools will try and put them in separate classrooms or try and manage that. And net, I think we're going to open in September half-heartedly, and I think we're going to close. And I think that by middle of October, November 1, we're going to be all remote learning.
It's kind of like the baseball season, right?
Yeah.
We're going to give it a go. Then people are going to get sick, and then people are going to get scared, and then it's just kind of going to implode.
All right. So the last two things I wanted to share are these two IEEE. I mean, one of the things if I were a parent of a school age kid today, I would be looking at every new possible way to do remote learning in a way that's vibrant and different than old school. So I mean, I find myself wondering about what happened to. Whoops, did I lose you? Where did you? Well, I'll keep going and then you'll come back. I find myself thinking about, well, here, let's, there you are. And you're back. Hey, lost you. So IEEE has this interesting site about essentially how education is changing. And there's a site called tryengineering.org. And it really is, I mean, it's super geeky. But what I liked about it was, if I were a parent today, I'd be going, where are different resources? I mean, we don't hear much about in the midst of all this. We don't hear much about Khan Academy.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why.
Oh, because you know what? There's so much happening right now in terms of like video content creation. So when Khan Academy started, it was so like prolific and different because it was really a massive content library that was free, open, accessible, education oriented. But if you look on like YouTube, for example, there's so much video content, and then you have all these. Go ahead.
I guess I'm just asking myself if I'm going to be if I'm going to manage my child's education for a year at home, rather than waiting for the public schools or your private schools to invent a 8-hour curriculum that can be done remotely, why wouldn't I say, here's some music, here's some theater, here's some curriculum guides, here's what's going on. If you're interested in engineering, here's a thing to use with IEEE that,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what can we learn from Minecraft? Why aren't there? And maybe the answer is they are out there, and I just haven't found them. And I'm not looking, frankly, because I'm not teaching. But why aren't there kind of parental guides, as opposed to parents waiting for the world to build an education alternative?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think honestly, it just needs to get built. Everyone's just scrambling, I guess,
I mean, I assume homeschooling communities already have some version of this built, right? I mean, homeschooling is not a new thing.
Right. Yeah, that's it. I think there's a website like Teachers Paying Teachers, which is actually teachers sourcing lesson plans from other teachers. So you can search for it. It's there, but the content is enough. You need the accountability. You need your students to be focused, right? If I were working on Zoom calls as a parent and I told my kid, hey, go through these 2 or 3 hours of exercises, videos, etc. If my kid were playing Minecraft instead, how would I have the energy to actually monitor their behavior in the middle of my workday?
So just to wrap things up, it's good that education is what we're focused on. It's good that it's revealing in the Atlantic article and some other things the hypocrisy or the lack of attention we've paid to teachers, to education, to its role in society. I mean, I think that's all good. That being said, though, I think somebody's got to say out loud, this is not a thing that is likely to be. I mean, what happens when we get to next July and there's a bunch of, not cures, but treatments. And meanwhile, our healthcare system's fallen over. I mean, it seems like now's the time to actually think of so here's my proposal. I think if I were doing this, I would partner up with 5 other parents that have kids my age. And I would say, you're taking Monday, you're taking Tuesday, you're taking Wednesday. Each of us is going to take a day off. We're going to say to our companies, I'm not going to work 5 days. I'm going to work 4. We'd like to get paid, but if you want to take a day, off, take it off. And there would have to be some kind of, community-based, takes a village. Everyone's going to take
school co-op.
School co-op. Now somebody's going to send me an email and be like, of course, that's what we're doing. But
I mean, I could see, especially in communities like New York, I mean, you could maybe even organize it in certain apartment buildings, right? Because there's such a density of people around.
I like that idea. All right, well, we're out of time. Next week, we'll back to our regular show with a broader array of conversations. We won't focus on one topic because it is a little bit intense. That being said, have an excellent week. Stay safe. Wear a mask.
See you next week.
See you next week.